Ladies and gentlemen, we'll convene our Development Review Commission meeting. We thank you for joining us here tonight on October 23rd, 2018. Our opening statement here. The Development Review Commission is created to hold public meetings and hearings to provide analysis and recommendations to the City Council regarding general land use policies and applications, where the Commission has recommendatory power, and to render final decisions on specified applications where the Commission has final decision-making power, including but not limited to all aspects of a proposed and future development. The Development Review Commission recognizes that the creation of a desirable environment throughout the city for residents, business, and industry is a prime requisite for the interdependence of land values, aesthetics, and good site planning, by promoting harmonious, safe, attractive, and compatible development that is therefore considered to be in the best interest of public health, safety, and general welfare. By way of introductions, we have with us to my left Commissioner Barbara Lloyd, Commissioner Philip Amorosi, Commissioner Scott Sumner. I am Chairman David Lyon. To my right is Vice Chair Michael DiDomenico, Commissioner Angie Thornton, and Commissioner Thomas Brown. By way of city staff, we have with us tonight Saparna Dasgupta, Diana Kaminsky, Robbie Aaron, Christopher Ray, and in our audience we also have Ryan Levesque. Now, our first item of business is to consider previous meeting minutes. We have reviewed these and found them acceptable without changes. I'd like to hear a motion, please, regarding approval of those meeting minutes. Okay, I hear one motion from Vice Chair Michael DiDomenico to approve. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Some of us were absent for some, so I can't vote on.
Fair enough. Okay. I apologize, I don't have the dates right in front of me.
September 12th.
Let's have a motion for August 28th then.
So moved.
Okay, second? Second. Okay, moved by Vice Chair Michael DiDomenico and seconded by Philip Amorosi. All those in favor by show of hands, please. And motion passes 5-0 with 2 in abstention. Motion for, what is our second date?
September 12th.
September 12th. Do I hear such a motion?
So moved.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, motion to approve from Commissioner Philip Amorosi and seconded by Commissioner Barbara Lloyd. Do I, all those in favor by show of hands, please. And those opposed? And motion passes 4-0 with Commissioner Tom Brown, Angie Thornton, and Michael DiDomenico in abstention. Nope. Oh, you did? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Well, let's amend that then. For a roaring start tonight, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so the motion passes 5-0 with Tom Brown and Michael DiDomenico in abstention. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we have one item on our consent agenda tonight. That is Apache Taxi. If you wish to have the case heard and have an opportunity to comment on the case, we can do so if you will make it known. Are there any in our audience who would wish to hear this case? Seeing none, we'll go ahead with our consent agenda as is with just Apache Taxi. Do I hear a motion regarding its approval?
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Second?
Second.
All right, motion to approve from Vice Chair Michael DiDomenico and seconded by Commissioner Barbara Lloyd. All those in favor by show of hands, please. And the motion passes 7-0. So we will now move on to our final item on the agenda. We have lofts at 8th Street. We'll ask Mr. Aaron to introduce us to the case.
Good evening. My name is Robbie Aaron. I'm a planner with the Community Development Department. I'm planning on this case. Lost on 8th. Lost on 8th is a townhome project, 4 buildings, 28 units, 3 stories tall, located on the southeast corner of Gary and 8th Street at 1402 East H Street. just south of the historic Kirkland-McKinney ditch. There's 2 requested entitlements, the first being a zoning use permit for a use permit standard to reduce the front setback from 20 feet to 16 feet. The front setback on this particular property is along Gary, so the setback would be 16 feet on Gary. And then development plan review, including site plan, building elevations, and a landscape plan. Once again, it's on the southeast corner. There's 4 buildings. They are 3 stories tall, approximately 36 feet in height. There'll be 28 units total. Each unit will have a 2-car garage. Each unit will have a patio balcony that faces the interior of the development. Their 2 buildings on the north will be oriented so their fronts face 8th Street, and the 2 buildings on the south will be oriented so their fronts face the neighborhood. There is also 36 spaces of additional parking on the south side along the alley. North elevation, as you can see, just basic, 3-story townhomes, doors. Garages are on the south elevations on buildings 1 and 3, and on the north elevation on buildings 2 and 4. So all these elevations are for building 1. They're just oriented differently, but all the buildings are generally the same. East elevation of building 1, so this is what would face the neighborhood to the right. Surrounding on the east side is R16, and there's also R16 to the south side. Across the street along Gary is a multifamily apartment complex, and then there's a park across 8th Street. The west elevation along Gary on building 1 and the west elevation along Gary on building 4 will have an entryway with a patio, which I'll get to condition of approval on that in a little bit. Sections, these are 5-bedroom, 5-bath units. There's also an alternate floor plan to have a 5-bedroom, 5-bath, but on the upper floor, on the 3rd floor, there will be a shared bathroom and a true master with a walk-in closet and an ensuite bathroom. On the normal floor plan, as proposed, each room would have its own bathroom. So this is the normal floor plan. So you can see there's on the top there's 2 bedrooms, and each of those has a bathroom on the 3rd floor, and then the one on the front also has a bedroom and a bathroom. The alternate floor plan has a master bedroom with a large walk-in closet and then an ensuite bathroom, and then the 2 bedrooms up top would share a bathroom in the hallway. The landscape plan meets code. The one thing I will say is that they had to go to Historic Preservation Commission back in February to get approval for all the landscape along Kirkland-McKinney Ditch. Kirkland-McKinney Ditch is a designated property on the Tempe Historic Property Register, and so that portion of their site required approval by Historic Preservation Commission for any sort of disturbance. They also did archaeology along all over the site, actually, and along the ditch, as this does lie within the La Plaza area, so that was taken up with the Historic Preservation Commission as well. So Historic Preservation Commission approved the landscape plan along the Kirkland-McKinney Ditch on both sides, and they also gave the authority to the Historic Preservation Officer to approve any potential changes to that landscape plan that may arise throughout this process. The other thing with the landscape plan is SRP has a 35-foot easement that starts at the north portion of their property and extends 35 feet south. It basically encompasses the Kirkland-McKinney Ditch, as they are the purveyors for the Bureau of Reclamation, actually, to maintain that ditch. And so some of the trees along 8th Street, actually all the trees along 8th Street will be placed in steel planter boxes, as that is the agreement that we were able to come to with SRP to get those street trees along 8th Street. They don't want anything in the ground near their ditch, and there's not a whole lot of space there anyway, so that's an agreement that we came to with SRP and with the applicant to get the street trees along 8th Street that are required. So I'll just go into some renderings. As you can see, they are stucco, brick, and hardy plank on the renderings. This is facing what would be southwest, looking at the front portion with the ditch in the background. Again, looking from the north, so as you're out on 8th Street or a little bit above 8th Street, actually looking at the project from the north. This is the interior portion of the project with the balconies that each unit has that kind of provide a little overhang over the garage to pull into the two-car garage that each unit has. This is from the corner of East Orange Street and Gary Drive, what the project would look like from that corner. As you can see, like I said before, these are all single-family homes just south of the project. So this is kind of what the project would look like in context of those single-family homes. Again, this is looking the other direction, northwest from the neighborhood. Staff's recommendation is to approve subject to conditions. As I said, the City of Tempe Historic Preservation Commission approved a certificate of appropriateness for the landscaping improvements to Kirkland-McKinney Ditch. The non-standard conditions that staff has implemented are as follows. Number 3, a minor development plan review is required for the proposed pool area prior to the issuance of building permits. Number 9, to reconfigure to orient the 2 west end units of buildings 1 and 3 with the front entrance on Gary Drive, and to provide a 5-foot deep by 16-foot wide front patio. Number 14, on sheet A 1.0 in the packet, the first floor of all units, to remove the den, office, optional bedroom, and closet, remove the shower to design a half bathroom, and first floor to provide open floor plan for general living space as shown in the drawing that is directly below that, and is also in the staff report. Number 15, to eliminate sheet A 1.2 third floor plan and utilize sheet A 1.21 alternate third floor plan with a master bedroom that is larger than the other bedrooms and contains amenities such as walk-in closet, and the remaining bathrooms are shared. So this would essentially be the only third floor plan. It would not be an alternate third floor plan. It would be the third floor plan, and we would just have one as opposed to 2. And 18, the project shall comply with the required street trees along 8th Street on the north side of Kirkland-McKinney Ditch per the Zoning and Development Code. Street trees shall be planted either in ground or in a movable planter box above ground. Final landscape permits are subject to review by the City of Tempe, and we're also coordinating with Salt River Project. And that is all. Questions?
All right, thank you, Ravi. Any questions for Mr. Aaron? Commissioner Amorosi.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to be clear. So you're saying that now all the units will only be 4-bedroom, 4.5 bath, not 5-bedroom, 5 bath.
That's correct.
All units. All right. Thanks.
Other questions? Vice Chair Michael Diedemann.
Well, just clarification, what you're saying is if this proposal carries this condition of approval, do we know, is the applicant in agreement with this condition of approval? I imagine we'll hear from them on that.
The applicant, I'll let the applicant address their stance on that particular condition of approval.
So, Commissioner Amorosi, the developer is not proposing to do away with that 5th bedroom and full bath. Staff is recommending that we adopt that condition of approval.
That's correct.
All right, thank you, Mr. Aaron.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, we'll invite our applicant to come and tell us about the project.
There we go. All right. Thank you, Chair, Commission members. Excuse me. My name is Neil Calfee. I'm with Calfee Development Advisors. My address is 502 South College in Tempe. With me today with our team is Kevin Moore. He is our landscape architect. John Spalding is the project architect. And then Tom Traeger is the property owner and developer. And what I'd like to do is to start out with Tom to come up and just introduce himself, talk through just what his vision and what brought him to this project.
Thank you. My name's Tom Traeger, and I'm from Fishers, Indiana. And we've been coming down, my wife and I, since 2010 to the Tempe area. We have 4 children, and our second son went to ASU. We now have rented a house down here just north of McClintock for the last year. We have 2 children living here. One's in a graduate program at Cary, and the other one works in town. My past history, mainly for the last 15 years, has been in building development. I've worked at different colleges and been focused mainly at the University of Notre Dame in South Bend. And we have examples here in the last 15 or 10 years. We've built, I believe, 8 townhome communities and 3 student apartment communities surrounding the university. And so when we first started coming down here, and have to admit I liked Four Peaks, but we looked at this property across the street, and I just saw an opportunity similar to what we had gone and done up north. My wife and I, through 30 years of work, have made and saved a little extra money, and so I don't know stocks and bonds and all those good things. So we decided that we wanted to invest down here as we look to spend and be the classic snowbird, spending more time down here. So we invested and purchased this piece of property. And we've been working with staff, and we've been through a lot of revisions, and I've probably gotten to know them pretty well. And Robbie keeps seeing us come back with a different alternative. But we've come back with this 28-unit layout. And our approach, I mean, just hitting the elephant in the room, is we're bringing this to market to try to sell it. I have experience in communities. I can show you communities. There's in the package of Irish Crossings, one in South Bend that was a 79-unit townhome community. We went to market with that, sold to your typical alumni market surrounding the university, and also had a larger student housing REIT come in, EDR, that you're probably familiar with. It does a lot of work here in town. They purchased 21 of the units. Across the street from the 21 units, there's a gentleman that bought 2 townhome units, put an elevator in it, also gave a large donation to the university and has a field named after him, and he lives right across the street. There's also people in the community in the same neighborhood that are on the board of trustees, CEOs of public companies. So what we've done in this community is we've created what's really the strength is our CC&Rs and covenants, codes, and restrictions, and especially we have extended ones if anybody comes in and purchases a unit and decides they want to make it as an investment to rent out. Quite frankly, the hardest ones to manage weren't the EDR units because we lay down the law and it's easy to manage kids in a set area. The harder ones to manage is when an alumni purchases a unit, might live in Dallas or Philadelphia, and he comes in and he allows his kids to go in there, and they have an attitude where they think they can do anything because daddy owns it. But we have specific rules. We have rules on how many people can be on the deck because we realize the importance of the people that live there full-time or are not students, just the importance of their investment. Another community on the other side of campus, we've built 5 communities in an area called Eddy Street Commons. We had marketing studies in 2007 when it came out on the market and said that the most expensive unit you should build here is $190,000 due to the conditions in their market study. In the last 10 years, we've built 200 units in the 4 communities. They average probably close to $400,000 to $500,000. And we've seen a big trend in college campuses where I'm in the baby boomer group, and after we raise our kids and a lot of people are moving back, investing back in their schools. I see the opportunity here on the west side of campus for the same thing. We've been coming down here, like I said, for 8 to 10 years. Mill Street's nice, it's very vibrant, has an urban feel, but that's not for us. We would like to be 5 minutes away. We feel like having a microbrew, having a coffee shop, places like we eat at Social Hall, and we think the east side of campus is the late bloomer and ready to really go forward in the next 5 to 10 years with the development of the golf course. So we've invested and put a townhome community in here, and within the options that are shown, there's also many other options. A popular option is on the 3rd floor to have, instead of, right now we show 3 bedrooms, 3 baths. As staff spoke of, they favored the one with a master bedroom with 2 smaller bedrooms and a common. We've also seen where couples come in and they form LLCs and they put 2 master suites on the top, and then they would have a suite on the 2nd floor and the suite on the bottom floor, and 4 people go in together as couples so that they could use the unit. We really feel the bathroom, full bath on the 1st floor is very important. It opens up our alternatives to different markets. My wife and I would take a plan where we would take the half bath off the 2nd floor and we would leave that down below for a mother-in-law suite or people coming in from out of town, good friends. We think this is a market where you'll find your friends really being friends from January to March, but they'll come down and you have a place for them to have their own place downstairs. They're not intermingling with you up on your 2nd or 3rd level. The 5-bedroom, 5-bath smells student housing. That's if we can't sell anything else, we have to have the ability to go in here and fill this up. That's not the direction I want to head. We've platted the community way before these conditions came out. If I was a greedy developer wanting to come in here and just build and market to student housing, I would have never put in 28 single-family plats, because it would have been a lot cheaper civil engineering-wise to come in here and just run 1 or 2 sewer lines in, 1 water line out, instead of 28 individual ones. And like I said, we've built in different markets where it's a combination hybrid, this community. We think we're kind of frontiering over here. Some people might say we're kind of crazy because there's not anything at this level. But again, that's just the risk I'm taking as a business private developer and see the opportunity here.
And obviously, Tom is available for any questions that the commission may have. Obviously, with the report by Robbie and Tom's discussion, I think what I'll do, if it pleases the commission, is just kind of go through a very truncated presentation for you, and I think you've got the
I think
gist of it.
truncated is appropriate.
I like that. Okay. This slide just helps, I think, give you a sense of where the Kirkland-McKinley ditch and that easement lies, and that's really kind of obviously a defining feature of this site. It makes your development window to be sort of more rectangular and narrow because of the setback requirements and the like. So that, when you see the design, that is also what drove some of that in terms of being, in some respects, that issue of trying to make that rectangle work. Another piece to note here is that the former Tempe Manor, which was built in 1958, it used the alley to circulate all of its parking. So in terms of our use of the alley and what we're proposing in this project is no different than what has been going on here since 1958. So we're not proposing anything new. We will be improving the alley and upgrading that in terms of that condition right now, but the project will then circulate through the alley. There used to be trash barrels back there that were a problem. They've now gone to individual containers for the surrounding property owners. I think that's an upgrade in many respects and should also help make that alley more presentable going forward. Okay, that's what Tempe Manor was. That's the ditch. If anybody hasn't seen it, this is its current condition. It is maintained by SRP, as Robbie indicated. It has no landscaping on it. That is actually by SRP's design and doing to make sure that it doesn't. We were able to negotiate with them and come up with a landscape palette that works for them, but still allows them to maintain the ditch. It's worth noting they need access to this ditch on both sides, not just on the north. So that's also driving some of this in terms of the area that is left on the south side is mandated by SRP in terms of their maintenance needs for this facility. That's the site today. The Tempe Manor improvements have been demolished. They were in a failing condition to begin with when we took over the site, and it made the most sense to demolish it and not try to maintain it, the residents that were there, or to try to manage something that would be obviously an attractive nuisance if and when it was vacant. These are historic fig trees, which are on site now, which will be remain and be part of the revised landscape plan that was designed by Kevin. Okay, the requests. So obviously, we have the development plan review and the use permit. To Vice Chair's question, we are looking to modify condition number 9 as proposed by staff and remove condition 14 and 15 entirely from the project. This is the
Actually,
site.
if I may, I'd like to jump in and ask right now, how would you modify condition 9?
I can show you graphically better. What we were looking for is a minor DPR for that to address those west elevations. There's some challenges in terms of those zones that are shown in blue-green. Being able to put in a 5 by 16 foot patio in there where we have landscaping, transformers. There's a lot happening there. It could impact the ability to have the street trees of a certain size. So what we'd like to do is we're not against having the doorway or the patios. We just want to make sure it makes sense, not be mandated to a 5 by 16 pad, to really understand what makes the most sense on that side. Both those units have existing patios planned on the north or the south side of the unit. So it's not as if they don't have patios or doorways into the units. This was an extra condition, and we understand what staff's position in terms of engaging the project to Gary Drive, of course. But there's also then to push and pull between landscape and other things that are going on that side. And then finally, west-facing patios in this climate are not going to be a lot of fun half the year. And so that's another condition of does it really make sense. But again, we'd just like to have a minor DPR opportunity to work with staff on that.
I guess I'm not sure if that sounds to me more like remove the condition or if it's modified, what is the language of the modified condition?
Well, our suggested language would be to have that issue that staff identifies to be dealt with through a minor DPR. If that can't be engineered in terms of language, then we could ask to have it removed.
Okay. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Let's see. I think, obviously, you saw the elevations, this view that Robbie provided. And again, where you see the transitions between colors, there is relief there. I think the challenge in some of these projects is when you have them obviously in a rendering like this, you lose some of that shading, but the project does have those transitions where the colors change. There is movement in that facade. The facades then also have the windows that are recessed. There are window treatments, metal window treatments above each of the windows, and really a desire to bring in different material types and to try to break that up. And again, there was a conscious decision not to create some verticality in the lines of the units, but to try to break that up, being cognizant of being next to the neighborhood and not wanting to sort of make something look imposing, such as it is from the neighborhood side. But it is worth mentioning again that this project does face the neighborhood. It doesn't turn its back on the neighborhood. All of the internal workings of the project are within the alley, so the patios and other pieces of it are from that alley side. And then, let's see here. As mentioned previously, the project circulates internally and uses the alley to circulate around.
I have a question. Could you flip back to the elevation? That's good. Are you stating that those windows are recessed?
There is some recess to that. And Mr. Spalding can come up to speak to that if that's something you would like.
Thank you.
Regarding parking, I think that's probably the last thing that I would take up specifically on the site. The ordinance calls for roughly 90 spaces to be included. I think your staff report says 84, but then if you add the guest parking on top of that, it's rounded up to 90. This project provides a total of 148, but from an ordinance standpoint, there are 84 per the ordinance that are provided within the garages, plus the additional parking off of the alley. There's also 2 spaces available within the driveways, which are not counted towards the ordinance requirements, but they would be available for residents or guests to use if they wanted to park into their driveway. And then there's obviously, in terms of a the guest parking is available as well. There are 68 bicycle parking spaces, 2 of which are in the garage, plus 12 exterior. So I guess it would be a question for the chair and the commission. Would you like me to go through the reasoning behind our modifications to the conditions, or would you like to discuss design, or how would you like this to proceed?
How about we move to commissioner questions, and I think that'll get us there. If not, we'll circle back. All right. Questions for our applicant? Vice Chair DiDomenico.
I'll start with an easy one. The center drive, you talked about potentially there being room on the exterior of the garages to park 2 additional cars in a surface condition. How deep? I know that I noticed the planters seem to be fairly deep and kind of pinch off the driveway. What's the depth of those parking spaces?
Can you come up to speak to that?
I noticed the curbing kind of sticks out into the drive a pretty far distance from the structural support.
I'm John Spalding from Spalding Design Group. I live in Mishawaka, Indiana. They're 18 feet deep for the parking on the outside of the garages.
18, okay.
Other questions? Commissioner Sumners.
Thanks. Just have a question about the pool area and the zone that's a landscape zone just north of that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So the building facades look decent here, but when I look at the edges of where the pool would be, it looks like it's about 20 feet wide, 40 feet high, all stucco, no windows. Is that right?
Chair, Commissioner, the sense there is we were debating back and forth about what is going to happen in that pool area. Right now, we think it's probably more like a landscaped, potentially hot tub type of area. I don't think we're completely set on whether there should be windows overlooking that or not from a standpoint of privacy or what makes the most sense, but that's something that we're open to looking at.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about it from a user standpoint. I'm trying to picture a space that I've been in that there's 40-foot walls on either side with nothing on it, and it's straight stucco. And I can't think of it because I don't know who would build that. So I encourage you to think of a little more deeply about that.
Okay. Commissioner Thornton.
Just a quick question regarding whether this is going to be for sale or for rent. I understood originally it was going to be for sale, but we got a letter from one of our neighbors, Mr. Buss, who says that he was disappointed to learn it was switching from for sale to rental units. So which is it?
It is for sale.
It is for sale. And how much are you going to sell them for?
Mr. Traeger can speak to that. It would be in excess of $500,000 a unit.
Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Sumners.
Yeah, sorry, second time around. Just in reviewing the plans and before we had the chance to talk today, this looks to me like multifamily. And I understand it's single family, and I understand there's property lines and all, but it's the 5-bedroom and 5.5 bath is what really kind of leads me to that. I guess we've seen other projects that have caused some issues in the neighborhood, and I think we're getting a few letters from neighbors who are having some concerns as well. I just want to get a feel for how supportive your team would be to do something other than 5-bedroom, 5.5 bath throughout.
I think myself and Tom can tag team this answer. I think what we have said from the beginning is this project has to have options. And so to be able to go to the market and have a broad enough appeal in the market, it needs to be able to have the 4-bedroom option with the traditional master that has the 2 bowls and a walk-in closet, or to appeal to an investor who's also part of this market. So in terms of being able to go into what is a very speculative market in terms of for sale, because there is not a comp for this, for better or worse. There's not been a for sale product in a mile of this area in probably a decade. not counting habitat or some of the other issues that have gone on. So this is speculative, and that's being able to then hedge that risk with the ability to have the options, but they're options. It's not a foregone conclusion that they are going to be 5-bedroom, 5.5 bath. Tom, do you want to add anything?
I can't recall actually what I said prior, but that's the truth. It's a for sale product. We platted them individually. We have to be in a position to start this just in our kind of game plan was to see how things go tonight. We have our building plans to complete and take to the building department. Site work probably has 3 to 4 months, and we'd be breaking ground vertical for it probably late spring. And in the next, we have a marketing program similar to what we've used before. We'd be working with local real estate companies. We have connections of trying to go into State Farm's office. We'll be try to work with Four Peaks. We'll be on the MLS. We also have connections, like I said, that's recently come up just due to Major League Baseball and the ability to switch the upstairs to 2 master suites, and also having the suite on the 2nd floor and the suite on the first floor. The 4 master suites appeals to groups that might want to come down here for games, golf tournaments. Obviously in the month of spring ball, there's just an appeal to be close to the campus.
Can you speak to whether you'd be willing to take that option?
I really can't, because I take the risk of being able to fulfill my financial obligation on this project. If it would fall through, I don't know. It's not my #1 goal. Like I've said, I don't want to come in here. I'm trying to be a full-time player. We're moving down here. We hope to have more boutique products as we hit the market, and I've worked in neighborhoods where, or in communities where we have a combination of both. The key is you probably hear this all the time, but it's your covenants, codes, and restrictions and how you enforce the community. Whether it's 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms, it's how you locally enforce. We feel good about this. There's a lot of technology. We would have security cameras. Probably we've had different layouts of 6 to 8. You have live pictures. You have whether we have our own staff on within an hour away. That's the way we've done it before, where our salesperson and a maintenance person, construction person for the first 2 years are on call. And then you have the ability, I mean, you've seen the technology even in home and Nest cameras and things like that. We have the technology now to see problems right away. And again, I can't draw a correlation. I've personally built 3 student apartment complexes, 8 townhome complexes, and I've seen no correlation in problems between the number of students or residents. It's usually, quite frankly, we've had more problems. We've had more mental health issues in larger graduate complexes where there's a lot of single bedrooms and there's not a lot of interaction between people. But again, whether you sell it to Neil, who comes in here and brings 2 of his buddies from ASU and they get together for football weekends, or whether you have 4 or 5 students in there, you have to have the same rules and enforce them, and email him a nice little fine of $500 or whatever the system is on Monday morning after they are out of line on a Saturday night.
Did that adequately answer the question, Commissioner?
Okay, I have a couple of questions and comments, if you will bear with me. First, I'd like to say thank you for traveling from Indiana to be with us. We appreciate having you in our fair town, and we know it's a fair commitment to come out and do these things. We appreciate that commitment to the project. I would now like to circle back and give you a chance to explain your reasoning behind the changes or deletions that you're asking for to those conditions.
Chair, did you want another discussion on condition 9, or is that clear?
Personally, I'm fine with 9.
Is there any questions from the commission on number 9? No? Okay, thank you. The next would be the removal of condition 14. First and foremost, we have the option that staff is proposing is an option. It's something that's easily done, that will be part of the package that is offered to the market. There is reasons for having that option the way it is and being able to do different things with the unit. I mean, obviously, we feel that having the ability to put that bedroom in that configuration makes a lot of sense, not just from any standpoint of student rentals, and I think we've beat that horse to death here in some respects, but also in terms of mother-in-law units, Airbnb, other flexibility options in terms of what that unit on the ground floor could be. So that's an issue. Staff recommended within the report that it would be a parking problem. As we laid out, we essentially, if each one of these units was configured as 5 bedrooms throughout the entire thing, that's basically 140 beds, we have 148 parking spaces. So if for some reason they were all 5 bedroom and every occupant brought a car, we could technically accommodate all of them on site and still have guest parking. And it's obviously not our intent. That's not how we would hope to operate the project. But that's really just from a standpoint of parking. I think that is not a viable issue to raise in terms of why the 5th bedroom would be a problem. And finally, there is not an existing policy or code requirement that says that you cannot have 5 bedrooms and 5 baths. I think it's obviously an issue that comes up. I think it's something that you deal with as a commission and the neighbors are challenged with. But frankly, there's nothing in the code and there's nothing in policy that says it can't be here. And so I would say that's where for somebody coming in looking at a project like this, there were no indications that they couldn't do this. And it was proposed. Now, obviously, staff would say it's not desired, but it's not prohibited. So that would be the issue on question 14. Any questions for
that? Commissioner Brown.
You've mentioned 148 spaces for 140 bedrooms. I just want everyone to clearly recognize that they're counting 54 of those, 56 of those to be tandem units where they're parking the driveway to and the park driveway behind the garage and counting that as 4 functional units. And I challenge that that's actually very functional. All you need is a few guests, and I suspect that you have actually a parking deficiency.
I think it was in our defense, it was a matter of looking at could it be accommodated if this was the absolute worst case. And so that's an issue it's not desirable, and I don't think it's realistic to believe that this is at all going to be all 5 bedroom units, or everyone will show up with a car, especially given its location.
I'm just saying, with people coming and going, you're realistically, functionally, you're under 100 units, in my view. I just thought we'd state that so that we're all looking at the same same driveways. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Quick aside then, do we have an issue here where we need tandem parking use permit? Do they need tandem in order to meet their numbers?
Chair Lyon and Commission members, for single family, that is not, and use permit is not required.
All right, so you've run us through condition 14. Is there anything you wish to say on condition 15?
Chair, the condition 15 is similar to 14. We do have that option for a more traditional master suite as indicated and that's shown on the plans. We are seeking that this condition be removed so that we have the option, we have the flexibility to either have that sort of single bathroom, single bedroom combination that's shown as one alternate, or have the ability to offer the full master as shown as the alternate on the plans. And so we're basically again saying, and then back to condition 14, there is nothing in the code, policy, or ordinance or otherwise that says that this is the configuration that has to be in place.
Okay, fair enough. Well, now I have a couple comments. And again, I thank you for coming to visit us. One thing that you may not be familiar with is the directive that we have from City Council, which is to be cautious about student housing and units with a large number of bedrooms such as this. While we don't have something chiseled in stone that says thou shalt not have 5 bedrooms, it is the purpose of this commission to make evaluations about when that does and does not make sense. I will say that I personally feel some trepidation about this project in those regards, in that in the way you talk about the project yourself, you're not sure that you can sell it, and you want the ability to have it as to sell it to investors who will turn it around and rent it. And that's where we get a little nervous. That's, in my view, not the ideal project that we want to see. We don't want to see this turned into a huge number of investment rentals. A couple other questions and comments for you. I got a text and a comment from Suparna asking about how this is built speculatively as townhomes. Do I understand correctly that you're going to put shovels in the dirt, did you say sometime in spring if all goes well? And, okay,
Yes, that's correct.
okay. And then is the thought that you will try to sell all these, pre-sale all these units by spring in order to determine which type of floor plan will go in each unit?
No, the way we've done it in the past and the way we would approach this is you try to pre-sell within, there's 7 units in each building. And so your key is you would only sell, you would only give the option to the people for, let's say, building 1. And then there's, because the project has to be built out in order, so by the time you are ready to go with your first building, then you might have 1 pre-sold, you might have 6 pre-sold, but you would work specifically with what you have at that time. The other things that we do, and we've done in the past, is we would give ourselves the option to retrofit. We would put extensions of headers in different locations. We would run plumbing and different supply lines at locations so that in the event that we could switch a unit out, we have that ability to do so very easy. One other thing I wanted to add, that we're talking about the 5-bedroom that's missed, that's been a positive, is that there's also a market, if it does, and we keep forcing, but we're looking at the worst scenario here of student housing. One of the alternatives is with the traditional 4-bedroom, 4-bath student housing up on the 2nd and 3rd floor. That lower level, what that gives is that gives usually the parents buying it, it gives them the opportunity to come visit and have their own quarters away from their children. So we've seen it where we've had families out of Philadelphia, different markets, where they know their students are coming to the university over the next 8 to 10 years. They make the investment, and then they use that facility when they come in for special weekends, and they also use it at different times of the year as when they come in, maybe for a summer week to go golfing. But there's other uses for that lower level. There's a multitude of uses other than just sticking another student in there.
Okay. So I think that we've heard a fair amount now about the issues of 5 bedrooms. And if, I think what I'd like to do when we come time to the motion, I will ask that the commission first entertain a motion regarding the application as you've requested with the modifications you've proposed. And we'll see how the vote goes. If that doesn't pass, we may do a motion in which we say, let's consider it as staff has written it. Now, having gotten through all that, I have kind of one more personal note that I'd like to touch on, which is the architectural design. This is a sort of thing that I don't necessarily think should be a deal breaker, but once in a while I feel like I need to say something. I'm not wild about what this looks like, and I feel like this is not a $500,000 townhome that we're looking at. There are a fair number of projects of similar products in our city, and I think some of them have been a lot more successful than this design. I look at these elevations and I see kind of patchwork quilt. We'll kind of break the mass and we'll apply this material here and there and there. And I'm not sure why, would you not switch this one and this one? And why is this paint better here than there? And why is the brick better here than there? And when I stop and think about it, I realize it's because there isn't a reason. It's pretty arbitrary. And we're not breaking up the mass of the building in a way that it feels like these are individual buildings which happen to be connected together. This is not a series of townhomes. It's kind of a quilt work laid over top as a texture. And that just personally grinds my gears a little. I think we can do a little better than that. I don't know if anyone else will feel similar, but that would give me a little bit of pause. So now I've made my remarks. Any more questions? Vice Chair Domenico.
Neil, if you could, let's just focusing on the use permit piece of what we're dealing with today. Simple request, reduce front setback from 20 to 16 feet. Tell me about the design and the site restrictions why is this use permit necessary?
Obviously, the front yard setback is, by code is 20 feet, and that's, again, off of Gary Drive. This is really an effort to not have the project be closer to the neighborhood and allow for the site design to work in such a way that as we go further east, we are closer to that neighborhood. There is some room there to do so, but the decision was that it made more sense to push the project closer to Gary.
So if you shifted it 4 feet, we'd be pushing it to the neighborhood on the east and having more room for the patios on the Gary side, but you felt Gary's already a buffer, better to push it towards Gary.
Obviously, in terms of looking at Gary Drive, I've been out there, understanding that right now there's not permit parking on Gary Drive, so it's used in most nights and some weekends. All is parking for Four Peaks. The project directly west of that is a lovely shade of blue, and it's apartments. I would certainly say that it's probably a buffer, and again, why we oriented the project the way we did, essentially north-south, better views, and really tried to get this so that it was not closer to the neighbors to the east.
Okay. And materials question for the DPR part. We keep using the term stucco. Is the finished material, and I didn't look at a board, is it really an EFS finish, or is it a trowel applied stucco finish?
It's integral color trowel applied. Yeah, integral color trowel applied.
Okay.
So it's not a painted surface. That's the color that is applied to the exterior.
All right, integrated. Okay, that's the last of my questions.
All right.
Chair Lyon, just to remind, there's a public hearing period to open up the project to public comments.
Thank you. I am forgetful. Commissioner Brown? No, thanks. Okay. So we'll thank our applicant, and now we have a moment for public comment. If you wish to speak on this case, we can provide you 3 minutes to do so. There are some white cards, should be on the back white table there. Looks like you're way ahead of us. If you fill one out and give it to our city staff, we appreciate that. Looks like you're our first volunteer. Come on down. Oh, yeah, sorry. If you could state your name and place of residence also, please.
My name is Nathan Crowell. I live in Tempe. I own the house at 1402 East Orange Street, which is right on the corner of Gary and Orange, directly behind this. I have several major concerns with this development. The first of all is the density. I mean, 5-bedroom units, 5 bathrooms. This is a multifamily, development. There are going to be a lot of people here. I've seen tandem parking. It doesn't work. But I'll go on. Parking continues to be a problem on Gary Street with Four Peaks, and having parking on both sides of the street doesn't allow for two-way traffic at all. I don't know if you've ever been there, but when you're pulling into Gary Street at almost any time of the day, one person has to stop and let somebody else go through. So I would ask that we try to address that in some way, make either no parking, preferably no parking on either side of Gary Street, or on one side or the other. Since my house is on the east side of Gary, I would say no parking along the east side of Gary, or close Gary Street off at the alley, which I think would help a lot of issues. Traffic through the neighborhood, again, with Four Peaks and just in general. Closing off Gary Street, I think would help limit a lot of traffic and would really benefit this development if we could maybe try to address that. The other issue I have is that there's 3-story units looking right into the backyard of my house. And that's not going to be favorable for my tenants, the people that are going to live there. I don't see any buffer landscaping along the south side of of the development. I don't see any attempt to limit visibility, whether it's louvers or some structure that keeps people from, having that visibility directly into the backyard. I know that there's been some discussions on previous developments trying to limit, maybe having, a 2-story unit right up against the neighborhood and then 3 stories further out. I would just ask that the committee or commission try to take a look at that from, the neighborhood. And I've lived in that neighborhood. I've had a house there for 35 years. I used to live on Lemon Street for a number of years, and I still own that house. So I have a personal attachment to that neighborhood and that area. And one of the other concerns is just these are 3-story stucco square boxes, and we're trying to cram as many people into a small space as possible for the sake of economics.
Okay. I have a lot of interesting questions, Mr. Crowell. Commissioner Thornton, please.
Hi. So where do you live exactly?
Right now, I am living at El Parque, which is right behind the Native New Yorker restaurant.
Off Broadway?
Yep.
Okay. But you have a rental property on Gary?
Rental property, 1402 East Orange, yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Brown, please.
I just want to thank you for speaking with the most clarity. I think your points are very, very, very correct, very on point, and I appreciate your speaking tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Brown, to your point about the tandem parking, living at El Parque, there's a lot of those are set up for like 3 cars, and everybody parks in the yard. Everybody's parking in the front yard. Nobody parks in tandem just because you have to move a vehicle to get a vehicle out.
I would agree that it works if you have an antique truck or something and it's your own home. That's cool, But in a dwelling with potentially 5 homes or 5 bedrooms, 5 cars, I dare say that it's ridiculous.
Right, and 5 different people, and you don't want your roommate moving your car, and
all I need is 1 or 2, boyfriends to come visit. And
I think we've got you on that point. Let's move to Commissioner Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Crowell, for coming in and for speaking. Just a clarification, when you talked about closing off, you're talking about closing off the alley as it meets Gary Street, right?
No, I'm talking about closing Gary off, taking the fence, just making that alley just go straight on through, closing Gary off. We had a sketch I could show you, but
okay.
Just close, and see, Orange is accessible from either side, from Dorsey and from Una, is it? So to me, it would help a lot. It would limit just neighborhood traffic all the way through there. The parking, which continues, it's always an issue because even though it's permit-only parking, you still end up with a bunch of people, and then, parking enforcement has to come in. And it might give these guys a little bit more room, or give the development some more room to kind of logistically work through it.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I have Chuck Buss, I believe this says. Again, I didn't mention it. Mr. Crowell was very considerate of this. We've got little lights here to give you an indication of time.
Okay. Darn, you're going to time me, and I have a lot to say. Anyway, my name is Chuck Buss. I represent University Heights neighborhood, and of course that means I live in it. This project's gone on quite a while, and if we were sitting here talking about the original version of it, I'd be all in favor. It was originally to be 38 units that were 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath. The massing of it looked much better. It was 2 stories stepping up to 3. It had a wide variety of high-quality materials, sloped roofing with metal, wood, a small amount of stucco, brick. I think it was actually 5 materials altogether. The project was redesigned, reduced in number of units from 38 to 28, and in the process, the materials have been cheapened a lot. I used to have communication with the owner's representative, but that broke down months ago. He has not been forthcoming with information about changes. I've been to a couple of community group meetings where the project has been presented in its original form and its revised form. And it looks very cheap. It's just a bunch of stucco. I describe it as looking like 3-story cliff walls. I also did an analysis on this, and I don't know why he is compelled to do 5-bedroom units and fewer of them. To me, the sales price on the original project, 38 units, he could have sold the 38 units at $380,000 a piece and got $14 million, which is about the same amount he's trying to get now out of 28 units at $500,000. So he could have had a higher quality project, the same $14 million at the finish line. So I don't know why. I don't know why it's been redesigned. I guess because of the cheaper materials. My neighbors were crazy in favor of this at first. They told me in person. They put it on the Nextdoor website that we communicate on. They thought it was a good addition. This is not a good addition, especially the 5-bedroom. And I would hope that the commission will force the issue of the conditions number 14 and 15. I think that would be an adequate protection to the neighborhood to eliminate this 5-bedroom option and give us a true master up there so it doesn't turn into just a boarding house, which is what it looks like right now.
All right. Questions for Mr. Buss? I see none, so we'll thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, so we'll invite our applicant to come back up. If you wish, you can address what you've heard.
Thank you, Chairman. Regarding what Mr. Kroll said, I think it's worth just stating this property is zoned R4. This is a multifamily property that we are proposing to put a for-sale townhome product on. And the debate about 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms, but this is still, I think, in terms of, in my opinion, is a better product and project for the neighborhood versus what a typical R4 project would look like here. And I think that that's really the motivation of the developer. And in terms of heights and the issues, it's zoned for that. I think when you look at the concerns about looking into the backyard, the units are roughly 60 feet from the southern edge of the alley to the fronts of the units. And so this is not a project that they are right up on top of the backyard of that housing. Regarding parking on Gary, we're in agreement. I think nobody would argue that Four Peaks has the mother of all parking variances, and Mr. Buss and his neighbors bear the brunt of that, and that to the extent they went and got Orange Street as permit parking to help defend themselves is fantastic. And that was done. Chuck did all that. We would support permit parking on Gary if that was something that needed to happen. We'd support no parking on Gary. We completely understand that that's an issue, and that's something that we're not looking to exacerbate that situation, which is also why the issues that came up from Mr. Buss and his neighbors were, don't underpark this because we don't want to have to absorb your extra parking. And so that's also driving some of the parking numbers. I will also iterate that we're not proposing tandem parking. We're saying the driveways can be used, but from an ordinance perspective, it doesn't need to be counted within the calculation. So that is why we mention it in terms of the practical impacts of having these spaces available for guests, but in terms of or residents, but in terms of we're not proponents of it. We're not trying to have tandem parking be utilized or be relying on that for this project. And then I think I would say. Mr. Buss is absolutely right. The first project I think everyone loved universally. My job would have been much easier bringing that project before you than necessarily this project. If you'd like, Mr. Traeger can address the project economics if that's something that's of interest to you. But I think that there's a variety of reasons why the project was redesigned and into its current configuration. In terms of the concern about stucco and in terms of the design, happy to have Mr. Spalding come up and talk through that. If it's a condition or an issue for the commission or the neighbors, he can talk to why the project is designed the way it is and why materials were put the way they were, if that would please the commission as well. So that would be my rejoinder to the public comments.
Oh, excellent use of the word rejoinder. All right, questions for our applicant? I'll jump in if no one else will. I actually would like to hear about stucco as opposed to ephes. I thought we were talking about ephes, but we're talking trowel applied stucco. I'd like to hear about that choice. And I would like to hear very briefly about what drove you from the original design to where we are now.
Don, will you come up and speak to stucco? Introduce yourself.
Sure. Hello, Council. My name is Dave Gustafson. I'm owner's representative for Tom Traeger and 8th Street Developers. The proposed material that we were using there is a Western One stucco, where ephes is usually a 3-coat troweled system. It is not a 3-coat troweled system. This is a Western One-coat system, primarily used here in the Southwest.
And why the change to that material?
I don't think we ever actually proposed ephes.
The project was other materials earlier, right? There was much less.
There was Western One. Are you talking about the first project? I'm trying to make sure. Okay, yeah. So version 1 did have some Western One ephes, or stucco, as you call it ephes. I call it Western One stucco.
I'm not referring to it as ephes. To
Okay.
me, ephes is the 3-coat product you're referring
Correct.
to. Yes.
Correct. This is a 1-coat product. All right. And why did we change the question? That product was on the original product, the Western One, along with brick. Mostly the reason why that we made some changes is through some of the Planning Commission and some of their revisions, or let's say requests to make some modifications, add more brick, and give more delineation between units. The original product had did not have as much disparity between units. It was more of a flat surface.
I feel like maybe I've gone the wrong way with my questions. Let me try again.
Okay, maybe I misunderstood.
Yeah. Probably my fault. Can we talk about the original design versus where we are now? What changed the number of units and the architectural change?
Well, I think the original design was much more red brick oriented. It took more architectural cues from the Four Peaks building. So it was something that had a more historic look to it. It was, as Mr. Buss points out, it was much as a shorter product than this, but that was really what was referred to in terms of that was the material was primarily a red brick with a single-story ground floor of a stucco, whatever surface. So it was basically a contrasting lighter color with a darker up top.
Is it simply the economics of it that drove you to a different project type?
John can speak more as far from an architectural standpoint, but it was more going to 3 stories to break it up. We looked at projects at Scottsdale and Hayden. There's a proposed townhome. We looked at a few over on the western side of the campus, and then also some projects going in the Arcadia area and the redevelopment area through there. And what we were trying to get away from is in some of the pictures, I don't know if you recall the ones we built in the past with brick, it becomes very vertical looking, just institutional almost. So when we took these different components of material, brick, we tried to keep that on the focus on the lower level where pedestrian traffic and cars would actually see, and you would have the visual component of actually looking, say, for instance, at Four Peaks and looking at this project. And then what we did up above is we went with the different layers. Instead of going straight, we put some different directions in it to break it up so we would get away from the vertical massing. We went, okay, specifics on the first project, as we looked at going from 38, we went from 38 to 28 because in my experience in selling for sale product, you have to create a product. One of the leading components is to have a driveway. One of the challenges we had in our 8 different projects, most of them have, and probably around here in Tempe, most of them have more of like a 4-foot, 5-foot apron. And people that are going to live there full time want at least 18 feet so that they could park cars, whether guests are coming, whether friends are visiting, and so that allows us to give more of a full-time look. We also increased the size because the one gentleman said, I understand where he said he used the economics, I think, of 380 versus 500. We've experienced just the other in the college environment, we've experienced where people want more room instead of a tighter unit. And so it's riskier going with a more expensive unit, but we think with having the 2 cars to park in, or 2 parking spaces outside of your garage, and to have more adaptability on the interior, more space on the interior, you attract more of a affluent crowd that wants to be close to a university.
All right. Do we have any more questions for our applicant? I don't think we do. All right, thank you. Suparna, I'm going to look your way for a moment. Are there any additional comments you wish to make? I suppose I did not. I need to close the public comment section. Thank you, Vice Chair. So we're now closed on public comment. Thank you. Suparna, did you have any additional comments that you wish to contribute?
Just one additional comment, and that would be just previous meetings you saw the Tempe student housing, and it has been our general policy, and we have been able to work with the applicants typically to reduce the number of bedrooms, to limit it to 4. So they did the same thing, and they reduced it to 4, which is what you saw, and we've been historically successful in getting applicants to agree to the 4-bedroom rather than the 5-bedroom, 5-bath scenario that you're seeing. We have done it in multifamily scenario too, with multifamily projects too. So even though, as the applicant pointed out, that is not in the code because of the council's direction, and there is a council working group of student housing that they're looking into some certain policy decisions based on the issues that the neighbors and the residents face. So this is something we have done it in the past also. So this is not a new situation.
All right, thank you. All right, so commissioner discussion. Vice Chair DiDomenico.
Well, it's the applicant's lucky day today because I actually have direct experience with their product. I've stayed in them. I have, and I didn't realize that you had any connection to these properties before tonight. But I've stayed in a couple of yours. I'm a domer. I spend quite a bit of time back in South Bend. And I'm looking at this project completely differently than I would have without the knowledge of who their target is. These properties, I'm guessing, if they were planting this in Old Town Scottsdale, I'd say, okay, that makes perfect sense to me. This is the shared ownership, winter visitor, go see Giants and Cubs games kind of a product. Fractional ownership, if you will, Airbnb, home football weekends and spring training baseball, and this thing is going to be, in demand. And a big chunk of the year, people who own these units, when they're not staying in them, they're probably going to not be occupied. Their Eddy Street Commons project has a much different look. It's institutional. It's brick. It's massive. And I think it's going through a major expansion right now. It's a mixed-use product. You've got a lot of retail built into it too, but it has corporate ownership. It has, so people use it as corporate housing. They own units, but game weekends they're probably using them. If they've got people who travel in from Chicago that stay in them during the week while they're working in South Bend, it's a different target and not necessarily student housing. They're well run, they're well maintained, but a very different looking product than this is. Bigger units and flexibility in the units there makes sense. If you're a corporate buyer and you're buying this because you're going to have a bunch of attorneys or accountants who are going to stay in it during the week, you probably want 5 little bedrooms and you know, more of a dormitory style setup. If you're two families that are going to plan on coming in for, you know, golf vacations or baseball or whatever, you may want more of the master bedroom setup. And I've stayed in some of those units there that are very different and they serve different purposes. But if you're bringing your kids and having a big football weekend or a big trip, you want a big unit. You've got to have lots of room because you want to be able to put everybody up. So you may really want those 5 bedrooms. So I'm looking at this product very differently. And when I look at a DPR, the question I always ask myself is, you know, developers coming to us, are we getting something better than they could just cram onto the site just if they just meet the zoning requirements, you know, height and density and all that. And the point was made earlier, it's R4. You could put a whole lot more traffic onto this site and a whole lot more living units. They're not asking for a height variance. Parking doesn't seem to be an issue at all. The visitor parking are all those surface spaces behind the garage, you know, on the outside of the garage doors. I'm much less worried that this is a student housing project than I was coming into the meeting. I really think that this, you know, in the Tri-City area where it's located, has got a much better chance of being a for sale unit to those fractional ownership groups. It's a high price point, but I don't know. I don't think it's pie in the sky what they're explaining.
Okay. Other comments? Commissioner Lloyd.
Thank you, Chairperson Lyons. So I just want to say, you know, I agree with the applicant that this is a special site when you're at Four Peaks and you see it across the street. And I think that's what concerns me the most about the design is that you have Four Peaks, you have the Creamery project, and you are part of the Apache character area. And I just think it has kind of a cookie cutter feel. Everybody talked about kind of the sheer side. Yeah, you have the patchwork brick on there with the stucco and the wood. But to me, it doesn't feel special enough for that location because you are in kind of that charming neighborhood character area. So that would be my bigger concern along with the 5 bedrooms. I get Chairman Domenico's point about the different audience you might be targeting here, but I still feel like when you're going as a backup plan to have those 5 bedroom, 5.5 bath, that concerns me. But my overlying concern on the site is more to do with the design because you only have, you know, one chance to do something special on this site, and I just don't know if this is special enough. That's my opinion just on the design.
Okay. Other comments? Commissioner Amorosi.
Thank you, Chairman Lyon. Well, I have a couple issues. First of all, to address the way it looks, it doesn't meet the Apache Boulevard plan, which called for more natural materials like the first plan did. And it doesn't reflect, you know, they did a nice job around the canal, but it doesn't reflect the historic nature of 8th Street. And yes, across the street there are the Cape Cod apartments, but those were done back in the 70s. And I think the city now recognizes the significance of 8th Street. They're putting improvements in there. And it would have been real nice to, we're doing something new now. You have a historic neighborhood behind you. And it's not just a cultural resource area, but it's actually a historic neighborhood. And you're just plopping these 5 bedroom, 5 bath units, which to me does scream either student housing or, like you keep saying, investor properties. And then once that individual buys that, there's nothing to stop them from putting in a keypad on every bedroom door and the front door and just renting these out to strangers, constantly churning against a neighborhood that has been there for probably over 70 years. I think the staff has the neighborhood interest at heart with their conditions 14, 15, and even 9. It wouldn't hurt to have a wraparound patio around the side off of Gary, and yet you're even against that. So I just, to me, it's the out-of-state developer that wants to cram as much as possible in there, and then he's gone, and the neighborhood has to live with it, and I don't like it.
Other comments? Commissioner Brown.
Chairman Lyon, you expressed in rather polite terms maybe disappointment in the design. I would like to be as polite as you and say the design is not nearly as successful as some other 3-story townhomes which have been built a half mile west of here. There's several that are remarkably attractive, and this is not. I would agree with Commissioner Amorosi that the disinterest in wrapping the end of the building, which is really sliced off like a slice of bread, is disappointing. We're talking about moving everything 4 feet so you don't crowd the properties. I guess on the other end, the east end of the property, these units are 22 feet 4 inches wide, and boy, it would really be nice to take a couple units out and give that a nice end and develop that so that it isn't such a blank and thoughtless elevation. I can set aside all the questions about number of bedrooms and number of parking spaces. I would say architecturally it's disappointing and not a good asset for the neighborhood.
Commissioner Thornton.
I just want to get some clarification on number 9, because I thought you were more, it's a room problem for you, and it isn't that you don't want to do it, you just don't want to have to do those specific dimensions that, thank you.
And that is correct. We are not against wrapping or doing the patio. I think it's the prescriptive nature of that condition and the fact that there is some consequences, especially with building 1. We have an ADA sidewalk that is on that side that we have to address. There's just a lot going on there, and then we also want to make sure that we're maintaining the proper amount of landscape area so that we can have the large amount of trees that or the large trees that we were looking for on Gary Drive. So again, we are not opposed to having those units have the doorways or a front entrance or a patio. What we'd like to do is have the ability to work with staff to have some flexibility on the size of the patio and the location of that patio.
We can certainly put forward a motion where it's worded in such a way that it's work with staff.
Yes, thank you.
Chairman and commission members, just one request, if that was to happen, was staff, we can work with a certain specific dimension. What we would not like to do is not have any dimensions at all. Maybe they can match what the other fronting dimensions of the patio is, because we don't want it to be ended up open-ended so that you get a 2x2 or some patio that, like, what's the mechanism for, some minimal width of the patio that's still feasible. So we can work with some other number if the applicant can propose a different number maybe, but not having any specific number is a little bit of a concern for the patio size.
Well, I don't think we're going to pull out our architectural scales here and tell you what that number would be. It seems to me like maybe the thing to do is just find clever wording that expresses that the goal is whatever dimension, with the understanding that there may be some push-pull. And I'm open to suggestions as to how that's worded.
Well, I think what the applicant had suggested was to treat, we can give direction for condition 9 that it be amended to state that it's the intention that a patio of some configuration be placed at the east end, or I'm sorry, the west end of both elevations, and that the actual details would be worked out and treated as a minor DPR, meaning it doesn't have to come back to us, to the public body, and that the staff has the authority to work out those details. Would that be sufficient? So in other words, we're saying it's our intention, and I'm not making a motion here, but whoever makes the motion would say it's the commission's intention that there be condition 9 that states there shall be a patio, and we leave it at that, and then the actual details to be worked out as a minor DPR post-hearing with staff.
Commissioner DiDomenico, what if we, so staff is recommending 16 by 5, which is 80 square feet. What if we put parameters, say, between 72 and 80 square feet?
Can you pull up, just so we all can see what we're talking about, attachment 12 is a representation of what that end of the building looks like. Because it shows the lands, that's what was worrisome to me is there's large trees and landscaping at the end of those buildings, and what I'm concerned about is that all goes away if you make those areas all patio. And so now it's private hardscape instead of softening big trees that soften that ugly wall you don't like. Yeah.
Commissioner Brown.
If I could throw an architectural comment, a patio with trees in the patio and a little more space, it actually would break that up tremendously. Everything that is, I mean, there's always a lot of things going on around a building. That's the whole nature of design, is solve all this stuff. To say that an ADA sidewalk is pushing you out of the way when there's another sidewalk 12 feet away, we're talking about 4 or 5 feet. I think it's perfectly reasonable to say a patio should be 12 feet wide. That would be a number, and I think the staff is saying that developers come in and say, we're working with you. Here's your plastic brick, where a specific number is in fact a tool that actually ensures some effort made to design it.
I like all of this, and I'd like to push that we don't get too much more into the weeds on this. Instead, we entertain a motion at the appropriate time, not now, which will, as our applicant has said, that that issue will be treated as a minor DPR, and the intent will be clear that there shall be a patio of some variety.
I'd like to make a motion and just deal with the use permit standard so we can take that off the table if that's the pleasure of the chair.
Let's hold on motions for a moment, please. Commissioner Sumner.
Thanks so much for the courtesy there. I was the last one to speak, darn it. I jumped in earlier.
Go for it.
You know, I think if we've heard the applicant say a few times that you have the rights to develop to this height and to this density in R4. You're absolutely right, you do. The challenge that I run into is that now you've carved it up so that you don't have to follow all the rules that multifamily projects have to follow. And that's also in the code. I completely agree. But that's also why we have this body, and that's why we review development plans. And I think one of the things that we hear again and again is when we have one use that has a very high vantage point, and they're looking down into neighbors' yards. I don't know how many examples I can think of in my head where that's just been an issue. And I think the one thing we haven't talked about, thank you, Mr. Kroll, for your comments, is the view down into those properties from the 3-story units. And the one thing that we haven't talked about in addition to that is the fact that we've got a parking area with 36 spaces that has zero, well, sorry, there are 4 trees on that edge, I believe. So most commercial developments or developments of a substantial size would have to do a landscape buffer or a buffer of some kind. That's actually in the code. It doesn't apply here technically because it's a single family use, but this is a nuance of this development that we haven't talked about yet that I would really like to see addressed. And how do you do that? I think that was suggested that maybe you step the buildings down in height. I don't know if that's going to work. The minute you put in any kind of a landscape buffer, I don't think that's a condition. I think that's a redesign. Because I don't think you can put in 20 feet and move things around. I don't think you simply have time or space to do that. So, that's probably my biggest concern here is we've got R4 and we've got R16. We've got multifamily and single family, and we need to provide some protection between the two uses. And I don't see any of that here, where parking spaces back up to the property line and the access is through an alley. And by virtue of the code, you're actually able to measure from the center line of the alley for all your setbacks. And that's great from a density standpoint, but it's not great if I own a property just south of there. So that's my biggest concern.
All right, well, I will chip in real quick before we move on to more motions. Thank you, Commissioner Sumner and all. I just cannot see this property being Airbnbs or rentals in this neighborhood. I think if we have confidence that this can be single-family housing, then we should move forward with it as single-family housing. So I couldn't support making changes to the conditions such that we can get 5 bedrooms out of this, because I just can't see how that's a good product for this area. You know, architecturally, I do think that, frankly, we just fall short on the mark here. Regular sanded stucco, hand applied, that's what I have on my house, and it's not a great quality material. This is not going to be a product that looks great years down the road. We have a lot of historic, beautiful things in the area, and I just don't think this one makes it. So, having said that, let's have a motion. I would first like our motions to be directed as the client has directed and see how we feel about those. I said client, I meant applicant. Sorry. Do I hear a motion? Vice Chair DiDomenico.
I will attempt to put that motion into specifics. First, I would move for approval of the ZUP 10020, the use permit, as drafted in our packet. And then secondly, also move approval of DPR 180011, the development plan review, with the following changes. I would change condition of approval number 9 so that it is replaced with a condition that requires patios to be added on the western elevation of the westernmost buildings along Gary, with specific configurations and changes to landscaping to be worked out as a minor development plan review at the staff level. And I would propose striking conditions 14 and 15.
All right. Motion put forth by Commissioner DiDomenico. I'm not going to repeat all of that. Thank you for being brave to work through that. Do I hear a second? If you second it, that doesn't mean you have to vote for it. We just have to. All right. Thank you.
Well, I was going to say, can you second the first motion and not the, because I would second the first motion, but.
You'd like to see those two separated?
I would.
All right. All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's
So I don't think
handle
we can second them both.
let's handle the use permit first. Do I hear a second for the use permit motion? Commissioner Thornton seconds. All those in favor by show of hands, please. Just the use permit. So that is 5 in the affirmative and opposed. All right, so the use permit motion passes with Commissioners Brown and Sumner's in dissension. That's the word. Thank you. All right, now to the second motion. Do I hear a second of the second part of the DPR? All right, well, no one is going to second that motion then, so I would ask that a different motion be put forward. We do have to have some sort of motion.
Well, I need the number again, but I would move for the approval of DPR 180011 as proposed this evening with the conditions.
City staff's conditions,
With
or?
the exception of, condition number 9, to leave that to the city staff to help determine, and how do we want to word that?
We can say, you can have us a motion to amend condition number 9 as proposed by Vice Chair and the remaining conditions as proposed by staff, right?
Exactly what she just said. Yes, thank you, Suparna.
All right. So motion to approve with condition number 9 as rewritten by Vice Chair DiDomenico and conditions 14 and 15 as written by staff. Commissioner Sumner.
Would Commissioner Thorne be willing to entertain another condition related to the pool? You want to hear it?
Yeah,
Great.
sure.
So this just relates to the comment I made earlier about the faces of the buildings. So modify the east elevations of buildings 1 and 3 and the west elevations of buildings 2 and 4 to match the north elevations of building 1 and 2. Sounds confusing. If you read it in the report, it's pretty clear. With the exception of stucco, which shall not exceed 40% of each elevation.
Yes, I would be happy to add that to my motion.
All right, a complicated motion from Commissioner Thornton. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded from Commissioner Sumners. All those in favor by show of hands, please. And opposed by show of, was that in favor? Okay, and opposed. Okay, so the motion fails with Commissioner Thornton and Vice Chair DiDomenico in the affirmative. So we need to end on a, no, we don't.
We need to end on an affirmative vote, so a motion to deny.
I have a question for the applicant. Would it be of any benefit to give you additional time to discuss the project, change design, address some of the concerns of the commission for you to receive a continuance?
Give me a second. With respect to the elevation and changing those, yes, we would put more thought into that. Love is in the eye of the beholder, and I think you can speak. I feel like, I don't want to say an ally, but you understand what I've done the last 15 years. I'm not an out-of-state developer just coming in here and flying out of the place. I've made a commitment of my life savings and invested in this area, have been coming here. 2 of my children live here, and this is the direction I'm going with my family. And so we would most definitely, we first started with the additional brick with the rust color on the sign of 4 Peaks, and we'd be most willing to put more into that. That design, John Spalding does a lot of other work here. He's just not an Indiana person. We took that off we can show you 4 or 5 other townhome projects that had more of that caricature, a little bit more urban, more like the Valor on 8th project, than more of the traditional tying into 4 Peaks. We would be more than willing to do that. On the other conditions, I have to go through with the 5-bedroom because I think there's a market, and it leaves me the ability to do many things that probably only you understand.
All right, I appreciate the feedback, and I'm going to, these are big economic questions, both in materials and design, and I'd hate for you to not get another chance to maybe wrestle with some of these things. And your answer may be, this just isn't going to work for us, but I'd like to make a motion to continue DPR 180011 to a date to be determined later once you get a chance to take a look at our agendized meeting dates and talk to staff about how long you really need to get through the process.
All right. All right. Motion to continue from Vice Chair DiDomenico, seconded by Commissioner Barbara Lloyd. All those in favor by show of hands, please. And opposed, if any? All right, so the motion passes 5-2 with Commissioners Amorosi and Brown in the dissent. I will say that I really hope you do come back with you have love in your heart for this project, and we want this project to express that. We don't want to shut it down. We just want to see it be the best it can be, and we do hope to see you again with something that we can all feel a little better about. We thank you for your time and your bearing with us. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned. Do we have any, do we have any staff announcements?
if Chairman, if you would like me to repeat about the agenda items for,
I think officially we have to do that.
we don't have to, but it's up to you. It's up to you. I am happy to.
Please.
So we will talk to the applicant and see, but given the timeline and what we saw with the Tempe student housing project too, I would not recommend that we go to the very next meeting of November 13th because that's too close to the deadline to work out any details. So given that, most likely the November 13th meeting is going to be canceled at this time, and we will reconvene for the November 27th DRC meeting. And we will give you an update or provide an agenda with the use permits that you would see for that, for Stein for that, in the standalone use permits also, along with any other projects that are upcoming.
Okay, thank you, Suparna.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned. Thank you.